The first call came in just after midnight, when the highway outside the station went quiet, and that way it only does in West Texas. Dispatch thought it was a drunk at first, a trucker saying there was someone standing in the road, just standing there pale and still, a few miles outside town where the asphalt cuts through scrub and mesquite. The caller's voice shook enough that the dispatcher asked him to pull over and keep his headlights on the figure. He refused, said he wasn't slowing down for anything out there. 10 minutes later, another call. Different voice, same stretch of road. This one mentioned lights soft, floating points of brightness hovering just off the ground, sliding along the shoulder like they were being dragged by an unseen current. Then the sound, a low hum that vibrated through the cab of his truck and made his teeth ache. He said his radio crackled and went dead right as he passed the lights. By the time the third call came in, the desk sergeant stopped rolling his eyes. The fourth call sealed it. This one was local, a ranch hand heading home late, the kind of guy who grew up driving those roads and knew every dip and bend by memory. He said there was a person walking down the middle of the highway. No flashlight, no reflective vest, just walking slow and deliberate, like the road belonged to it. When his headlights hit the figure, the ranch hand swore the thing didn't cast a shadow. 2 patrol units were sent out, standard procedure, lights on, sirens off. No need to spook whoever or whatever was out there. The night swallowed them as soon as they left town. Out there, the darkness isn't empty, it's heavy. It presses in through the windshield and settles in your chest. The land stretches flat and wide, broken only by fence lines and the occasional oil pump nodding like it's half asleep. The stars hang low and sharp, and the air hums with insects and distant machinery. About 5 miles out, the radios started acting up. At first, it was subtle static bleeding into the channel, voices warping mid-sentence. Then the words stretched and slowed until they sounded like they were being dragged underwater. The officers tried switching frequencies. Same result. One of them tapped the dash, like that might fix it. Then they heard the hum. It wasn't loud. It didn't roar or scream. It settled into the air, a steady vibration that made the mirrors tremble and the fillings in their teeth buzz. It felt less like a sound and more like pressure, like standing too close to a subwoofer at a concert you didn't want to be at. They killed the engine. The silence afterward was worse. The hum didn't stop. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, the ground, the air, inside their own heads. The patrol lights painted the road in red and blue, stretching shadows across the brush. That's when they saw the lights. 4 of them, pale white, tinged with something faintly yellow. They hovered just above the asphalt ahead, drifting slowly, lazily, like they were suspended in thick liquid. As the officers stepped out of the cruiser, the lights shifted, sliding off toward the shoulder without any sudden movement, as if aware of being watched. One officer raised his flashlight. The beam cut through the dark and landed on the figure. It stood in the road where the lights had been, human-shaped, roughly 6 feet tall, proportioned like a person wearing clothes, except there were no clothes, no seams, no texture. Its surface looked smooth and matte, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. The flashlight revealed arms hanging at its sides, legs planted squarely on the asphalt. Where a face should have been, there was nothing. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a blank, featureless expanse, curved and seamless, like a mannequin head left unfinished. The officer lowered the flashlight without realizing it. The hum deepened. Neither of them spoke. Their training told them to announce themselves, to give commands, to control the situation. Their instincts told them to stay very still. The figure moved first. It took a step forward. The sound of its foot on the road was wrong, not a scuff, not a slap, more like a soft thud dampened, as if the asphalt itself absorbed the impact. It walked with purpose but without urgency, each step evenly spaced, perfectly balanced. The radios crackled once sharply, then went dead. The humming intensified, vibrating through the officer's bones. One of them felt his vision blur at the edges, the world narrowing, tunneling toward the thing in the road. The lights drifted farther out into the brush, pulsing faintly, as if marking a boundary. The figure stopped a few yards away. It tilted its head. There were still no features, no eyes to lock onto. Yet both officers felt the unmistakable sensation of being seen examined in a way that bypassed skin and bone and went straight to something deeper. The hum shifted again, changing pitch, and the air around the figure shimmered, warping slightly, like heat rising off desert pavement in the afternoon sun. One officer reached for his sidearm. The other whispered his name, voice barely audible, warning him without knowing exactly why. Because something about the way the figure stood there suggested it hadn't wandered onto that road by accident. It felt like it was waiting. And whatever had drawn it, there was only just beginning to notice the police had arrived. Later, both officers would struggle to agree on the exact moment things went wrong, only that the road itself seemed to tilt, like reality had lost its balance. The hum climbed another register, sharp enough now to make their ears ache. It vibrated through their boots, up their legs, into their ribs. The officer with his hand hovering near his sidearm felt his fingers go numb, like he'd been holding ice too long. When he tried to flex them, they didn't listen right away. The figure took another step. Up close, it was worse. The surface of its body wasn't skin, not fabric, not anything familiar. It looked uniform, smooth, like a solid shape poured into a human mold and left to set. The patrol light slid across it without glare, without reflection, as if light itself didn't know how to behave around the thing. "Sheriff's Department," one officer finally said, forcing the words out. "Stop where you are." The sound of his own voice startled him. It came out thin and distant, like it had traveled a long way to reach his ears. The figure stopped. For a split second, relief cut through the fear. Then the air shifted. The humming fractured into layers, overlapping tones that didn't belong together, low and high at the same time. The world around them blurred. Fence posts bent inward. The patrol car's lights smeared into streaks of color, like wet paint dragged across the night. The figure tilted its head again. This time, something moved beneath its surface. Not muscles, not veins. Something like slow current sliding under ice. One of the officers felt a pressure behind his eyes, a sudden invasive sensation, as if fingers were pressing gently but insistently into his skull. Images flickered at the edge of his vision fields, fences, the same stretch of road at different times of day. The sun low, then high, then gone entirely. The road empty, then not. He staggered back, bumping into the cruiser. The other officer didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at the featureless face, breath shallow and fast. His radio suddenly burst to life, not with voices, but with noise, a pulsing rhythm that synced with the hum, rising and falling like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Then the figure raised one arm, slow, controlled. The movement felt deliberate in a way that made the officer's skin crawl. It extended its hand toward them, 5 fingers, perfectly shaped, perfectly proportioned. The hum snapped off. Silence slammed down so hard it felt like a physical blow. In that dead quiet, the officer by the cruiser heard his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He opened his mouth to shout to warn his partner, to do something, but no sound came out. The figure took another step forward. The patrol lights flickered. Then, without warning, every light on the cruiser died. Darkness swallowed the road. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No hum, no lights, no sense of distance or direction. Just black. Then the sound came back, but different. Not a hum anymore. A layered vibration, pulsing in waves, like machinery spinning up underground. The darkness around them thinned just enough for shapes to emerge, barely visible outlines washed in starlight. The figure stood closer now, too close. The officer who'd reached for his weapon felt something brush his arm. Not the figure, something colder. The air itself seemed to fold inward, tugging at him, pulling his balance off center. He stumbled, catching himself against the hood of the cruiser. When he looked up, the figure was no longer directly in front of them. It was to their right. Neither officer remembered seeing it move. The road behind the figure shimmered, bending and warping like a reflection in disturbed water. The stars above that stretch of asphalt looked wrong, slightly smeared, slightly out of place. The fence line beyond it curved inward, bowing toward a point that didn't exist. The lights reappeared. 4 pale orbs drifted out of the distortion, floating low over the road. As they passed the officers, the temperature dropped sharply. Breath fogged in front of their faces despite the warm night. The officer by the cruiser suddenly felt the pressure behind his eyes surge. The images came faster now, fragments of soundless scenes. The same road, different nights, different vehicles stopped in the same place. People standing where he stood now, faces twisted in confusion and fear. Some of them didn't leave. He gasped, doubling over. That was when the figure turned its blank face toward him, and something changed. There were still no eyes, no mouth, no features, but the surface of its head rippled. A faint indentation formed where eyes should be, shallow and temporary, like impressions pressed into clay and then smoothed away. The sensation of being watched intensified, sharpened, focused entirely on him. The pressure inside his skull peaked, and then release. The hum snapped back into existence, blasting through the night like a wave. The patrol lights flared on all at once, blindingly bright. The radios screamed with static. The figure stepped back. The distortion in the road collapsed inward, folding in on itself until the asphalt looked normal again. The lights drifted away, sliding into the brush, dimming one by one until they vanished completely. The figure followed them. It walked off the road and into the darkness without urgency, without hesitation, as if it knew exactly where it was going. Within seconds it was gone, swallowed by the land. The hum faded last, thinning until it dissolved into the ordinary sounds of night wind, insects, distant machinery. The officers stood frozen, gasping, hearts hammering. Neither spoke. When they finally got back into the cruiser, hands shaking, the radio crackled back to life. Dispatch asked for a status check. The officer on the passenger side opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked back at the road. For just a moment, barely long enough to be sure, he thought he saw a faint impression on the asphalt, like footprints, perfectly shaped, leading away from town, and toward places the map didn't bother naming. They didn't file the report that night. They drove back to town in silence, patrol lights off, the road stretching ahead of them like nothing had happened. The radio worked again, clear and normal, but neither of them touched it. The hum lingered anyway, not in the air, but inside them, a phantom vibration that refused to fade. At the station, they sat in the cruiser for a long moment before getting out. The dash clock blinked the wrong time, frozen between minutes like it had forgotten how to count. When one officer finally shut the engine off, the sudden quiet made both of them flinch. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly. Normal sounds, normal smells. Coffee gone stale on a warming plate. The world pretending everything was fine. The ranch hand who made the fourth call was already there. He sat hunched forward on a bench, hat in his hands, knuckles white. When he looked up and saw the officers, his face drained of color. "You saw it too," he said. Not a question. The officers exchanged a glance. "What did you see?" one of them asked. The ranch hand swallowed. It was walking, just walking, like it had all the time in the world. He shook his head slowly. "I thought it was a person at first, until my headlights hit it. I kept waiting for it to look at me." "Did it?" the officer asked. "No," he said, "but I felt it anyway." They took his statement, routine questions, time, location, direction of travel. As he spoke, the lights in the station flickered just once, but long enough for all three men to notice. When the ranch hand left, the officers finally sat down to write. The words wouldn't come. How do you describe a thing that doesn't fit into any box you've ever been given? How do you explain radios failing, lights bending, A road that briefly forgot how to be straight. How do you write featureless human figure without sounding like you've lost your grip? One officer typed. Deleted. Typed again. Deleted again. Eventually they wrote something smaller, safer, a vague disturbance, possible intoxicated individual, equipment malfunction due to interference, no suspect located. They signed it and pushed it across the desk. The lie sat heavy between them. Neither of them slept much after that. The hum came back when they closed their eyes. Not loud, just enough to keep them hovering on the edge of consciousness. One of them dreamed of the road stretching endlessly forward, the yellow lines pulsing faintly, leading somewhere he couldn't quite see. The other dreamed of standing still, while something walked around him in slow, patient circles. By morning, the calls started again. Not reports this time. Questions. People saying their radios cut out late at night, saying they heard a low vibration near the highway, like power lines humming without wires. A woman said her dog refused to go outside after dark, backing away from the door with its tail tucked, whining at nothing. That afternoon, a maintenance crew found something strange. The stretch of road where the figure had been seen showed faint impressions in the asphalt, not cracks, not tire marks, shallow depressions evenly spaced, leading off the road and into the brush. The crew chief laughed it off, said the heat must have softened the surface overnight. The impressions didn't match any boots. That night the officers went back. Officially, it was a routine patrol. Unofficially, neither of them could stand the idea of not knowing. They parked farther back this time, engines off, lights dark. The stars were out again, sharp and cold. The land lay quiet, stretched thin under the sky. For a while, nothing happened. Then the hum began. It crawled up from the ground, slow and familiar, settling into their chests like an old memory. The radios flickered once, twice, then died completely. The lights appeared next, not 4 this time, 6. They drifted in a loose pattern, hovering above the brush on the far side of the road. They didn't move toward the officers. They didn't retreat. They simply waited, pulsing faintly in time with the hum. And then something shifted in the darkness behind them. The figure emerged slowly, as if stepping through an invisible curtain. Same shape, same smooth, unfinished surface. But there was something different now. It wasn't alone. Behind it, the air bent and folded inward, forming a shallow distortion, like a window that hadn't fully opened. The road behind that distortion looked wrong, too dark, too deep, like it dropped away instead of continuing forward. The figure stopped at the edge of the road. It didn't advance. It didn't retreat. The hum changed pitch, deepening, spreading outward. The officers felt it in their teeth, their bones, the base of their skulls. One of them noticed his hands trembling uncontrollably. The other realized he couldn't remember how long they'd been standing there. The figure raised its head. The smooth surface rippled again, but this time, the impressions didn't fade. They deepened, forming shallow hollows where eyes should be. Not eyes themselves, just the suggestion of them. The sensation of being watched sharpened. The officer closest to the road felt a pull, not physical, not exactly. More like an invitation pressing gently against his thoughts. Images flickered at the edge of his vision. The road stretching forward, the distortion widening, the lights drifting ahead like guides. Something wanted him to step closer. He took one involuntary step forward before his partner grabbed his arm. The hum spiked. The lights flared brighter, washing the road in pale glow. The distortion behind the figure widened just enough for something else to move within, its shadows shifting where no shadows should exist. The figure tilted its head, and this time the officers understood. The road wasn't where it had come from. It was where it hunted, and whatever waited beyond that distortion had learned how to find it, because somewhere, not far away, phones were already ringing again. And the night was not finished with West Texas yet. The 5th call never made it to dispatch. That's what bothered them most afterward. It showed up later, buried in system logs and incoming signal, that connected for 3 seconds and then dropped. No audio recorded, no location ping, just enough of a footprint to prove someone, somewhere, had tried to reach out. By the time the officers realized this, the night was already unraveling. The hum swelled again, deeper than before, spreading outward in waves. The lights drifted closer now, 6 pale orbs sliding over the brush and onto the road, stopping just short of the yellow lines. The figure remained still, half lit by their glow, its surface rippling faintly like it was reacting to something beneath it or behind it. The distortion widened, not violently, not suddenly. It unfolded with slow precision, the way a pupil dilates in low light. The road beyond it no longer looked like road at all. The asphalt dipped inward, stretching away into something darker, smoother, and wrong. The stars above that section vanished, replaced by a dull, featureless black. The hum shifted again. This time it carried rhythm. The officers felt it synchronize with their breathing, their heartbeats. One of them realized with rising panic that he couldn't tell if the rhythm belonged to the sound or if the sound was adjusting itself to them. The figure stepped forward. It crossed the yellow line. The ground beneath its foot depressed slightly, as if the road itself softened in response. The lights brightened in unison, bathing the figure in a pale glow. The shallow hollows in its face deepened further, not forming eyes, not fully just enough structure to suggest focus. Intent. The officer who'd almost stepped forward before felt the pull return, stronger now, not forceful, persuasive. Images pushed gently into his thoughts, the quiet beyond the distortion, the absence of noise, the release from pressure, a place where the hum didn't hurt because it was everywhere. He realized with a cold clarity that terrified him that the figure wasn't threatening them. It was offering something. His partner shouted his name. The sound cut through the hum just enough to break the spell. The officer stumbled back, gasping, vision swimming. The moment his foot left the yellow line, the hum spiked violently, vibrating through the road like a struck bell. The figure froze. Behind it, something moved. Not a shape, not a body. A shift like a shadow passing behind frosted glass. The distortion pulsed, widening another fraction, and the air temperature dropped sharply. Frost bloomed across the hood of the cruiser in thin spiderweb patterns. The lights flickered. For the first time, the figure reacted. It turned not toward the officers, but toward the distortion behind it. The hollows in its face deepened further, stretching, warping, as if the surface was struggling to maintain form. The hum fractured again, breaking into dissonant layers that clashed painfully. Whatever was on the other side was not patient. The figure raised both arms. The lights shot upward, rising fast, streaking pale trails across the night sky, before stopping abruptly above the road. The distortion shuddered, folding inward slightly, like something pushing back against pressure. The officers didn't wait. They ran. They dove into the cruiser, slammed the doors, fumbled the ignition. The engine roared to life on the third try. As the headlights cut back on, the road ahead looked almost normal. In the beam, the figure stood rigid, arms still raised. The distortion behind it churned violently now, shadows writhing against its surface, like something pressing to get through. The hum reached a peak that felt unbearable. Then it stopped, all at once. No fade, no echo. Silence dropped so suddenly it rang in their ears. The lights winked out. The distortion collapsed inward, snapping shut like a sealed wound. The figure was gone. The road lay empty beneath the stars, unbroken and still. No frost, no shimmer, no sign that anything had ever been there at all. They didn't slow down until the town lights came back into view. The official explanation came fast and clean. Electrical interference, atmospheric anomaly, stress-induced hallucination compounded by radio malfunction. The report from the maintenance crew was revised. The system log showing the dropped call disappeared during a routine update. Life moved on, mostly. Out on that stretch of road, Drivers still talk about the hum, about radios going quiet for a few seconds too long, about pale lights drifting just beyond the shoulder, always staying just out of reach. Sometimes, late at night, people say they see someone walking down the highway, tall, pale, unhurried, always heading away from town. The officers both transferred within the year. One left law enforcement entirely. He still can't drive that road without feeling the pressure behind his eyes, the sense that something is watching from just beyond the dark. The other stayed. He keeps an eye on the call logs now. On the system logs nobody else bothers to check. On the quiet gaps where something almost comes through. Because every so often, usually just after midnight, there's a brief flicker in the system. An incoming signal, 3 seconds, no audio. And somewhere out on a lonely West Texas road, the hum begins again low, patient, and waiting for someone to finally take the step it's been offering all along.